Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's online public meeting with North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. I am Jo Coles. I'm the Deputy Mayor for Police, Fire and Crime for York and North Yorkshire. On the call with me this afternoon are people from the Police, Fire and Crime Directorate. So Tamara Stevens. Tamara, do you want to just introduce yourself and the other members of the PFC team?
Yep, that's fine. I'm Tamara Stevens. I'm the Director of Police and Fire and Crime at the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority. And we also have online from the Directorate Amanda Wilkinson, who is the Head of Partnerships and Commissioning, and Fiona Kinnear, who is the Fire and Rescue Authority Manager. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And we are also joined by the Chief Fire Officer, Jonathan Dyson. Jonathan, do you want to introduce yourself and other members of the team?
Certainly, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So Jonathan Dyson, Chief Fire Officer, North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue. I'm joined by my strategic leadership team, which is Gary, our new appointee. Gary, I think it's only your second OPM into here. Ben Ilsley, who is Director of Emergency Response, responsible effectively for all of our fire engines and appliances. Charlie French, who is the Director of Service Design and Delivery. Charlie looks after all our risk and HMI inspections. And Damien, who is the Area Manager for Workforce and Response. Thank you.
Great, thank you. The meeting will start with the performance update. We've then got a presentation on the focus area for today, which is about ensuring we have a supported, safe and skilled workforce. We're then going to have a couple of questions that I have got to raise with the team, and then there is an inspection update. I don't think we've got any public questions, so hopefully that means that we will be on time this afternoon. I think we've got a slight change, so Ben Ilsley is going to do the performance presentation, which is very exciting for us. It's a change. Damien, we're going to miss your voice on this call, but it's nice to have Ben here. Ben, if you want to put your slides up. You've been on enough of these calls, so you know that I generally have quite a lot of questions, but I'll let you introduce each slide first.
No problem. Right, I'll just share my screen. You bear with me. Okay, can you just confirm you can hear me okay and that's pulling through okay?
I can see and hear you perfectly well, so that's great.
Excellent, thank you. So good afternoon. Today's performance section of the OPM, rather than just being on one quarter, we've just ended one financial year. So it'll be today bringing in some longer term trends and some summaries of additional data of the financial year of April 2025 to March 2026. Especially focusing on our prevention, protection and response and the services that we provide to our communities. So I'll start with prevention today. So a really, really positive picture and a lot of praise for a number of our teams today when we focus on prevention. So if I take back to 2 years ago, North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service delivered 3,167 home fire safety visits. So we saw year-on-year significant improvement last year, which took us to a level of 4,463. And we set an ambitious target as an organisation to improve that further to 5,500 this financial year. So I'm very pleased to report we've exceeded that target and delivered 6,353 home fire safety visits in the financial year of 2025 to 2026. So it's a year-on-year improvement of 42%. And also 65% versus the year before as well. In terms of outputs then and quality, that's a fantastic achievement for us as an organisation. A lot of the investment that went into the prevention team in 2 years is clearly working now and showing great fruits of the labour that works in that team as well. But I do want to just take a moment to signify the fantastic work and productivity of our operational crews as well. So 4,959 of the home fire safety visits last year were delivered by our operational crews. So that is a 57% increase of productivity of our operational crews, providing value for money and commitment to keeping their communities safe. As well as the prevention team doing fantastic work that we'll come to in some of the other graphics. generating more referrals and working better with our partners. The central team also delivered an increase in productivity by 8% and took their levels up to 1,394. So overall, that's what contributed to an excellent output in terms of our prevention offering. We did make changes 2 years ago to our station plans and some of the governance arrangements we put in place. So it's fantastic to see the outputs of that work now as well. To the right-hand side, to make sure it's not just generically more work, that we're retaining the quality of the work as well. You'll see from the graphics on the right-hand side, there's been significant growth within. We are still targeting the right premises, both from referrals and data-driven activity. So across all risk ratings, including very high and high risk, we are doing more. So you can see from the graph in the right-hand side, clearly the referral pathways and the kind of prevention targeting from the data as well that we use is beneficial. So quality and quantity within our prevention work. So I'll pause there. That's a summary of our home fire safety visit activity for last year.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I was in Ripon Fire Station yesterday, and I was in Scarborough a couple of weeks ago, and certainly a couple of the firefighters I spoke to were saying that this kind of work is now just embedded in everything that they do, which is really good to hear. I didn't ask the question; they just proactively told me that the kind of prevention stuff is completely embedded in everything that they're doing. So. Fantastic to see that those home fire safety visits are happening. Can I just ask a couple of questions about the targets and whether or not there are any standards nationally around the targets that you're aiming for, and just what the target is for the next year, whether you think you've peaked or whether there is a further kind of push to improve?
Yeah, so we do benchmarking. So every year, NYFRS release a data pack in the summer. So we'll be able to kind of show you benchmarking potentially at future OPM. I think it's fair to say kind of 3 years ago when we came together as a strategic leadership team, we were at the lower end of the metric NYFRS will use is home fire safety visits completed per 1,000 dwellings in your area. So it is relative to that area. So we've moved up that kind of scale significantly with these increases. We're keen to see when the data is released later this summer how much that's gone further, but there's certainly an appetite. Whilst we've not confirmed an exact figure for this financial year yet, we are pushing to see that grown further across our team. So we do aim to increase further again this year. We're just waiting the target setting to confirm an exact figure.
Great. Thank you. That's all I think on that one.
Okay, thank you. So the next 2 slides just further the story of growth and improvement within our prevention teams. So I mentioned before, the reason our operational crews have been allowed to be very productive in this area is because a lot of the work is being generated well for them now. So we do use data-generated target address lists. We're using data that identifies where potentially our highest risk personnel are within our communities. We'll target that way. But a big part of the growth, as well as some kind of in-house finessing of our processes, has been that we're increasing the number of referrals that we receive from partner agencies. So this is where a partner agency, whether North Yorkshire Council, City of York Council, Housing Association, the police or others, identify high-risk vulnerable people in their interactions with our communities. They'll refer them to the Fire and Rescue Service so we can get out and get into their homes and deliver a home fire safety visit. So last year we had a 30% increase in referrals, which went up to 2,345 last year. And again, I'm confident that we'll be able to grow that again this further, and it will generate more activity and increase our outputs further. So you can see on the right-hand side as well, across all our kind of major referral pathways, being North Yorkshire Council, the City of York, North Yorkshire Police and the Housing Association, every single one of those partner agencies increased the number of referrals they sent into us as an organisation. So the department's incredibly well led by Area Manager Hurst, and we brought in a very talented group manager last year who's brought a lot of experience from a different fire service as well. So that team's working really well now, forming from the changes that were made in the last RRM, and that's the kind of evidence of it working well. We are getting more referrals, we're being made aware of more high-risk people in our communities, and we're getting into their homes and making interventions to keep them safer. So I won't continue with the narrative there. That's a kind of a snapshot of our referral pathways and further evidence that as well as kind of outputs increasing, the quality of our work's increasing too. So I'll pause if there's any questions on referrals.
really just, I mean, it's great to see them going all in the right direction. It's really just a sense of whether those are now at your kind of expectations, and also whether or not within those, particularly the council referrals, obviously they are agencies that are in people's properties regularly or in touch with residents regularly, whether or not within those cohorts of City of York or North Yorkshire Council, there are particular departments, for example, who aren't making referrals, where you might have some concerns, or whether or not actually you're content that between adults, housing, public health, for example, that you're getting referrals from all areas of the council across the two local authorities.
Yeah, I agree. So I think it's fair to say, certainly under Area Manager Hurst's leadership, we contribute a lot to partners the other way around as well. So we make a lot of referrals. We commit a lot of resource to attending many kind of safeguarding boards and different partner agency boards as well. So MHS couldn't be here today. I think if he would, he'd make a further plea to other agencies. We want to continue that growth in there. So I certainly don't think we've met the ceiling of referral levels. It's good improvement, but we expect to and hope to see in the future that will improve further. And the Chief's got his hand up if he wants to add anything to that as well.
So, no, thanks, Ben. Just a point there, Deputy Mayor, where you said, are we content? Absolutely not. This is absolutely where we need to be, and we are, driving forward on this. The approach to identifying vulnerability and providing an intervention is the ultimate aim of the service. So anybody else or anywhere else in the community, or anybody that's watching this that is able to help us in that instance, and again, extra referrals, is welcome to reach out to the service. And of course, we'll approach that as best we can. Thank you.
Great, yeah, and I now meet regularly with the community safety partnerships from the two local authorities, and we'll also just ensure that that message goes out regularly, as I know the service is doing, into the two local authorities. So yeah, that's really positive. We can move on to the next one.
Okay, thank you. So the last point, this is again around referrals. This also kind of shows in terms of the referrals we make. So the point I made before, that to be a good partner with our kind of other partner agencies, we're evidence of the fact that we kind of contribute more to their kind of themes as well. So kind of referrals are both ways increasing within safeguarding, again, having devoted roles within the prevention teams. Look at that now as well. So again, just to add on the last slide around referrals, just to demonstrate that we are contributing more to other agencies as well.
And just a question really, given the big increase, particularly into adult safeguarding for adults, are you getting pushback from any of that? I mean, that's quite a large increase in referrals, or is, broadly speaking, are people welcoming those referrals going in the other direction?
Yeah, receptive. We're here to help as an organisation and to refer people to kind of help look after them. So if we go into a home, we certainly feel we have a moral, if not legal, duty to kind of make the referrals and identify issues. So a lot of that comes from, with that make every contact count approach. If we've got our crews interacting with the public who identify issues where they can help people further, there will always be the odd person who objects to that support, and perhaps sometimes they're the person who need it the most. So we've educated and upskilled our workforce that when they do identify safeguarding issues out in their communities, they will raise it, we will refer it, and our partners are certainly receptive to that work that's been done there.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, so that's prevention. So this brings us on in terms of incident trends and demand. So as well as outputs within prevention, obviously we're keen to see that when we do increases in home fire safety visits, it's making a difference in the community and reducing risk. So I draw your attention to the first bullet point on the left-hand side. 2 years ago, the number of dwelling fires, so a dwelling fire is a fire in a home where somebody lives, we had 251 dwelling fires in North Yorkshire and the City of York. So this year and the previous year, that's come down to a level around 230. So an 8% reduction. So it's not that we're having more outputs of activity in people's homes, it's showing that there is an outcome. So last year, the reduction around 20. You have to treat kind of year by year stats with an element of caution, but now it's remained at that level for a further year. We're confident that there's correlation, in fact, causation in the work that we're doing to make sure that it's not just outputs we're improving, but outcomes as well. We are, despite seeing, and I'll come to it a second later, despite seeing upward trends in other incident demands, we are having less fires in people's homes in City of York and North Yorkshire, which is really positive to see. We certainly have we want to see fires prevented. Response is a very valuable commodity as a fire and rescue service, but if we can prevent fires, that's what we want to be able to do. So really pleasing to see that as well as the outputs, we can see causation now that's having an input to the outcomes, and an 8% reduction number of dwelling fires in the city of York and North Yorkshire, which is really positive. And that is against the back.
Yeah, sorry, go on. No, carry on.
Okay, so that's against the backdrop. So on the right-hand side, despite having a reduction in the number of dwelling fires, whether climate change or other factors, we are seeing an increase in the demand of our response services year by year over the last 2 years. So the graph on the bottom right-hand side shows the number of incidents we attend as a fire and rescue service, are the blue graphs, and then the orange graphs are the number of deployments of our assets to incidents as well. So over the last year, we saw an increase in the number of incidents we attended, especially in the summer months, which culminates in a significant increase in the number of appliance deployments that we've seen over the last year. So it went from 10,500 region the previous year to 11,900 appliance deployments. So as well as being much more productive, it makes it all the more noteworthy the improvements in prevention activity from our crews, because they are being deployed to more incidents and spending more time at incidents as well. So you can see the kind of the correlation in the top right, what incidents are being increased. Special services remained fairly constant. So that's road traffic collisions, lift rescues, other things of that nature. False alarms, despite all the work to try and reduce automatic fire alarms, has gone up slightly, but the big increase year on year has been in the number of fires that we attend, predominantly secondary fires. So in the summer months, July was our busiest period last year. Everybody watching will recall the major wildfire we had from August last year as well. But if you look on the bottom left-hand side, you can see a summary of the top incident types we attend, and it's really pleasing to see that dwelling fires are not in the top 5 anymore. So we do still get a significant number of false alarms, good intent, where people may see smoke from a distance, and then when our crews arrive, there's no action required. But fires small in the open, more than 1,000 last year. So that's the big thing, whether through climate change, behavioural change, we're looking to prevent and need to be prepared for from a response perspective. So the overall summary is the incidents are going up, the appliance deployments are going up, our crews are being busier from an operational capacity, but we have seen a reduction of fires in people's homes. So I'll pause there if there's any questions around our incident summary for last year.
Thank you. That's great. And so it is obviously really welcome news in terms of dwelling fires. Just really keen to understand the small fires in the open category a little bit more, and what that kind of might include and what it kind of means in terms of deployment. So whether that is one appliance or something different to that. And also just on the chart on the bottom right-hand corner, the appliance deployments last year, presumably that includes the Langdale incident, where there would have been significant deployment of regional appliances over a number of weeks, if not months. So it's just really to kind of understand how big a factor that is in those numbers, because of that obviously is kind of one incident that had a lot of deployment, and just really to understand how that fits in the wider picture.
Yeah, so Langdale definitely had an impact. So as part of the debrief process, we're looking at the overall number of mobilisations. So that will account for a significant proportion of the incidents. We also had significant wildfires slightly earlier in the summer last year at Strensall, which had as many as 12 fire appliances attend as well. So it's not just Langdale. You can see from the blue bars, Langdale only counts as one incident on there. There are more incidents. Langdale wasn't the only wildfire we had in 2025-26, but you're right to point out that had a significant impact on that orange bar, given the number of appliance deployments required over a sustained period of time.
Great. And just talk to me a little bit about the small fires in the open and what those categories are, and how they're responded to. What's included in a small fire?
So a fire in the open is generally a fire that doesn't involve somebody's property. It could be in a park, a grassland area, anything of that nature. Bracketed small, there's no set definition. It would tend to be less than a hectare if it was a fire small in the open. So not the major wildfires we've had aren't classed as those. But certainly the data that's coming out of the NFCC around climate change is that the ground, we spent longer last year at a high rating of the wildfire severity index. The ground is drier. We had the hottest and driest spring and summer on record last year. It just means that there is any embers, the fire is a lot more, the ground is a lot more kind of susceptible to fire starting. And then if it does catch fire, it will spread significantly more quickly. There's also research and data that suggests that the soil in the ground is becoming more hydrophobic, so it doesn't retain as much moisture and water over the winter periods. You'll see already in kind of April time, our neighbours in West Yorkshire have already been dealing with significant wildfires this early on in the year, which, despite having quite a wet winter and start of the year, is something we need to have an eye on from a risk basis, definitely.
Sorry, just a couple of other questions. So in terms of those small fires in the open, it could be someone having a fire up their allotment, for example, that they may have had, and a member of the public might, or would that be classed as a small fire good intent if it was something that was just the public calling because they could see smoke? Versus,
no, you're right. In the open, so in a garden allotment would go into that category, yes.
And a barbecue out of control, would that count as a property fire or not?
No, that is correct as well. If it's in somebody's garden and not involving kind of a property that would, yeah, and disposable barbecues as well, yeah.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And then just finally, just on the road traffic collisions from last year, so 328 incidents in 25-26. Is there any sense of how that compares, and just whether or not, again, the seasonal uptick, whether there is some seasonality to that? I kind of assume there is because we get more visitor numbers at certain times of year, but just any insight in terms of those road traffic collisions, safety attendances that the service has had?
Yeah, so we attended 479 road traffic collisions as a service in the last financial year, which is a 16% increase on the previous year. So we have seen an increase in the number of road traffic collisions we attended. However, as it points out there, out of the 479 road traffic collisions, 328 were purely to make the scene safe. So that's where no rescue is required, any rescue operations from a fire and rescue service. It may be moving a vehicle off a road to allow the carriageway to reopen. It may be dealing with some kind of fuel that's leaked, or maybe running into a watercourse as well. So when you take those out, there was around 151, I think by my maths, road traffic collisions that required rescue operations from North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, which obviously we're keen to bring down. We're very active in the Road Safety Partnership, but that does benchmark quite low against the rest of the kind of country, if that makes sense. So 151 required fire service rescue operations, 328 were purely mobilised for us to make the scene safe. And I will just caveat with that, that's purely based on our mobilisation data. That's not necessarily every road traffic collision that happened in North Yorkshire. We don't go to every single one. We don't hear about everyone from highways or North Yorkshire Police as well. So based on our date of mobilisations, we've seen an increase with those caveats.
Great. All right. Thank you. So I think the overall picture is that the demand is up, but actually in terms of the types of demand, it is changing.
That's correct.
Summary.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the next slide moves on to our response capability. We'll start with availability. I know it's a topic that a lot of our communities are very keen to understand. So in previous years, we had seen larger decreases in availability of our assets, but the year end now between 2024, 25 to 25, 2026, there was a slight reduction by 2%. So for an organisation that has 40-something fire engines, that equates to just under one less fire engine available on average at different times. So massive amount of work goes into sustaining our current level of availability and attempts to improve it. One of the things I'm really keen to do is in the summer, as I mentioned before, when NYFRS released their kind of data pack, so we can see the benchmarking against the rest of the sector and see how we compare to them as well. But a massive amount of work. That is the smallest decrease we've seen year on year in the last 4 or 5 years in North Yorkshire. So positive that we're kind of stabilising. We'd love to see it increase beyond that point as well, but there has been a slight decrease. You can see in the top right-hand corner, a lot of the challenges with the on-call availability is it's not the primary employment of our, or most of our on-call firefighters. And what we do is we have to deal with a lot of fluctuations and variations in availability around people's private life, personal life, and their other employment as well. The other thing that impacted us last year that came into effect was the bans, the number of hours and pay that were agreed at the NJC. And have become terms and conditions for our firefighters as well. So you can see from the right-hand corner there, that's month by month availability, and you can see it does jump around quite a lot for the reason I've given there as well. And the last point I'll make on there, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, hopefully positive, certainly positive, is in the first 3 months of this calendar year, so the last quarter of the financial year, we've seen a very slight increase year on year for January, February, March. So in 2025, January, February, March was 72%, 70% and 69%. And this year's quarter of the last financial year, it's gone up each month by 1%. So hopefully you can see over the last year, it's stabilized to a certain degree. We're certainly not content that it's gone down 2%. A lot of work goes into maintaining that. A lot of work went into the recruitment over the last year as well. Significant intake of on-call firefighters. But it remains a challenge for us as an organisation, on-call availability. Something we've put a lot of time and effort and work into. We have stabilised it somewhat last year and shown a small increase in January, February, March year on year. But that's our overall picture for fire engine availability.
Just a couple of questions on that, really. The thing that concerns me, I suppose, which it would be useful to have some just further clarification on, is I absolutely appreciate the wider challenges that the service is grappling with, but from a public point of view, which obviously I'm here to represent members of the public, there is significant additional investment going into the fire and rescue service. People are paying more in their council tax than they were previously, significantly more over the last 2 years. And it's just really to understand how you balance the prioritisation of availability with people's kind of expectations in terms of what they should expect if something terrible happens in their home or to someone when they're out and about, in terms of being in a road traffic accident or whatever. It's just, I understand the work that's taking place, but I can also understand from the point of view of the public that they're paying more for their fire and rescue service. And at the moment, that availability looks to be worse than it was a year ago. And just really whether there's anything else you can add on that.
No, that's understandable, and we share that view, Deputy Mayor. So we're very mindful of this, as well as the longer term kind of strategies that were put in place 2 years ago. Some of them don't come to fruition straight away. So whilst we've had a significant number of new on-call firefighters start in the last couple of years, we've had full courses, which we didn't have 2 or 3 years ago, certainly. That gets new development firefighters. A number of our stations, what we then need, and it takes time, is for them to become competent in role and then become trained in driving and to become officers in charge to take the fire appliance out. Because at some of the locations we do have, it's not purely around numbers, it's having the skills and capabilities that brand new starters don't necessarily have. And it takes time for them to be fully competent in all the requirements to get a fire engine available. But what I will say is, as well as the kind of the longer term goals and work that goes into this on a daily basis, control, the duty tactical officers work to kind of move personnel around to cover through our operational staffing reserve, through dynamic mobilising. So if there is any gaps for on-call firefighters or cover, we use our dynamic cover tool to kind of balance the fire cover that we do have available on that day. And what we can also evidence is kind of heightened levels of prevention work in those rural areas as well. So we're actively trying to prevent fires from starting where we do have availability challenges as well. But I do fully respect your view and your opinions. We understand that completely.
It's more just I'm just representing what I think is probably a wider public view. And so therefore, in terms of that kind of lag time, does that mean that people should actually anticipate that availability would go in the other direction going forwards?
I think we're cautiously optimistic, Deputy Mayor, about improvement that goes in there. The huge challenges we have with this model with the on-call is your catchment areas within 5 minutes of an on-call station. There are other factors that are well outside our control. So if you look on the East Coast, for example, where we have townships such as Filey, more and more people who used to live in that area, there's more kind of buy-to-let properties, people aren't living or working in that area and available to form an on-call crew. So everything that was within our control, we're aiming to do and do well and do that. But there are sadly some elements that are outside of our control with on-call model based on where people live, where they work, ageing population across North Yorkshire, where people may not be able to be on-call firefighters as well. So our commitment is everything that was within our control, we will aim to do well and we're very committed to, but there are factors outside our control within on-call availability as well.
JD, did you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry, Deputy Mayor, just as a point of assurance for the public, that they have indeed supported the service exponentially with the increased funding, which we're very grateful for. This is still offset in some ways by some of the cuts that we've seen within the sector and within North Yorkshire. But availability is a very strategic issue, tactical issue, operational. It affects all of the organisation, and the public can absolutely rest assured that we are doing everything we can to increase on-call availability across the county, not just in key areas. Langdale for us was a significant incident, but Langdale and incidents like Langdale just recognise that our on-call availability and our on-call firefighters, how valuable they are not only to the service but also to their communities, and they're a vital part of it. So once again, that call will always go out to the communities to represent them, to join the service wherever possible, and if they're interested, of course, we always share those details. But availability is not something we're ever content with, and it certainly isn't something that we sit on our laurels, and it's right, understandable that you hold us to account for that. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. We can move on to the next slide.
Okay, thank you. So the next section of this around responses, our response standards. So if you recall, over a year ago now, we went out to public consultation to set standards so we can be open and transparent with our public about the level of service they should expect and hold us to account on. So we set 2 response standards on the left-hand side. So the first one is an overall incident response standard of 13 minutes. So on average, for all the incidents we attend, which includes some that we don't respond to on blue lights because of the low risk, we will get to within an average of 13 minutes. And then when there's a fire in somebody's home, dwelling fires, where we always go on blue lights, and it's high risk for us, on an average of less than 11 minutes. So because of this meeting happening so soon after the financial year's end, not all the quality assurance is complete, but it will only improve further. So we will and have met our response standards for this year. There is further quality assurance to be taken place over the last 3 months to go back to the year. So we do expect to see them come down further. So at this point in time, we're representing a response standard for all incidents of 12 minutes 15. As I said, I expect that to come down further. And for dwelling fires of 10 minutes 52. And again, expect that potentially to come down further as well. So they are potentially both going to be slightly higher than they were the previous year. And I'll just explain some of the kind of factors within there. So I have put a graph in the kind of the pack today in the bottom right hand corner. So that's the last financial year. Hopefully it's big enough that people can see it enough. So because it's a large sample size, all the incidents we attend, it's the light blue line on the graph, generally remains quite stable through the year. So it balances out over the course of a month. We attend 500, 600, 700, up to 800 incidents per month. So obviously there's a lot of variance around where different incidents happen, different crew models and stuff like that, but it tends to balance out. So the only time that we exceeded our response standard for all incidents in 2025, 2026 was August. So we had a significant number of appliances assigned to Langdale. It's our busiest month. It's the time of the year where most of our staff want to take leave, which is understandable as well. And you get more kind of fires in the open, rural fires, as mentioned for, as Langdale has proved there. So it balances out quite well. The dark blue line is dwelling fires. So because we typically on average get, as mentioned before, 230 in a year, 19 to 20 per month, there's a lot more variance. The law of small numbers, when you get a smaller data source size, sample size, you'll get more fluctuations in data. So you can see over the course of last year, the 2 months that were slightly higher were August. So we had a larger dwelling fire response standard in the month of August. Again, the link between a lot more of our crews being deployed to other incidents simultaneously. and then also quite a strange outlier month in December. So I've done further looking into the December for dwelling fires. As I said before, we typically get around 19 to 20 dwelling fires per month in North Yorkshire. There was only 14 in December. So when we looked into that data further, the reduction was because we had, and it's actually positive, we had less dwelling fires in urban areas where it's more whole-time crews that respond to. So it's a bit of an outlier month in December. And if you take those 2 calendar months out, given the Langdale impact and the quite anomaly of December, we'd be at 10 minutes 30, which is the same as 2 years ago and very similar to last year as well. So you do get variance within all data sets. We're keen to make sure that isn't an ongoing, certainly no look at revising our response standards at this point in time as well. Last year was very busy given the kind of the weather conditions and Langdale, but over the course of the year, if you remove the Langdale outliers and the reduction in dwelling fires in December, we'd have been reporting a dwelling fire response time of 10 minutes 30 seconds, which is very similar to 2 years ago and last year as well. So we'll wait and see with the overall response standard when the full QA process has been completed. Again, we expect to see that come down further. And again, if you remove the Langdale outlier month of August, that would come back down below 12 minutes as well. So very similar to last year. So yeah, no work is being looked at to evaluate the suitability of the response standards. We just need to look at some of the natural variance you get within data. But we understand why the 2 months that were slightly higher last year. We will meet the publicly agreed response standards, and we understand where we had some variations and the reasons why for the last year as well. So I'll pause there if there's any questions on our response standards.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. And I think one of the things that probably would be helpful would be when that, given that we normally only look at the annual data every year, so we wouldn't otherwise look at it until this time next year, it may be worth us just having maybe an extra slide once that data is finalised in a future pack, just so that we can just make it completely publicly transparent that the what the actual confirmed response standard data is for those 2 areas at whatever point that is confirmed. And I completely understand that there are, we cover a really large rural area, and if you have fires in areas where you don't normally anticipate having them, that can affect the average. It is really good to see that the standards are being met. So obviously that's really positive. I think it's possible that members of the public might correlate the appliance availability with the changes in the response times and the response standards over the course of the 12 months. I don't know whether that correlation is fair, and I just wonder whether or not there's anything you can say about this slide in addition to the previous slide, and whether or not there is a correlation, or whether actually you think these things are unrelated, and there is other things kind of, this is a complicated picture for the Fire and Rescue Service, but whether it's possible to explain that in a way that the public would understand, because I think people would naturally just assume that the last 2 slides would relate to each other.
Yeah, so firstly, availability absolutely has an impact on your response standards, but not to the level that I think most people would expect. So our approach when the new response strategy was launched 2 years ago and dynamic mobilising was to try and get the most meaningful and impactful appliances available more often, not necessarily about trying to get more pumps on for the sake of getting them on in areas which were already covered, for example. So to prove that point, 2 years ago, our availability declined by 6%. That year, we reported the most improved response times in the country, despite a 6% reduction. The year after that, there was a greater reduction, and we brought the response times down again. So it's one part of that. The drive time is the biggest factor in our kind of response time. So a response time is made up of a number of component parts, starting with the call handling time. So somebody will call 999. That's absolutely something we can control and will control. So the time it takes for our control function to process the call, get the right information, and mobilise appliance. So we've brought that down over the last 3 years. There's then the turn-in, turn-out times. So for all our duty systems, that's the time taken between being alerted of an incident to commencing their drive to the incident. So for North Yorkshire, given the kind of the financial restrictions we have within our response model, especially on a night time outside of the kind of 6 p.m. till 8 a.m., The only areas are York, Acomb, Harrogate and Scarborough that have an immediate response. Every other part of our county requires either a day crew or an on-call crew to turn in from whatever they're doing in their personal lives, with their families, their private employment, to respond to the pump, then go out. So that's why we will never have response times that are competitive with metropolitan brigades that are fully hold time. We use mean averages because that's what our response standards are based on, what the government reports response times against as well. But we will do further kind of mode and media analysis to look at kind of further trends in the future as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Just sorry, two final points. One, I think again, I completely understand the challenges of delivering this response in particularly in the hours that you said in rural areas. What would be helpful would be to perhaps understand the range of response times that might be expected in different parts of the region. I imagine the response time in some parts of the region will be 2 or 3 minutes, and in other places it may be significantly longer than the response standard. It's just, I think, might be useful for people in our region to understand what that range might be. And then just finally, on February of this year, I think there were 21 dwelling fires, which was slightly higher than normal, but not massively. But the response standard overall, again, was just slightly missed in terms of that 11 minutes. And I just wondered whether there was anything particular about that month or those fires that had pushed that into not quite meeting the standard in February, although I appreciate that you've made it overall in the year.
Yeah, no problem. So the first part of that, yeah, as I said before, we're developing the capability now to be able to look at mode and median averages, to look at the range of response times across there. When that's ready, we'll happily report some of the extracts from there if they are meaningful to the public. And the second part for February, as I mentioned before, our availabilities was better than it was last year. There is just some natural variance. We've looked into February. There is further quality assurance to do, but we just had the incidents were just slightly further away. It's purely the drive time element. So we've looked at the call handling was as you'd expect. So we have a dashboard that looks at what we would expect our response time to that incident to be based on data and modelling to what it was, and there's been no issues within there. So there's been no kind of issues within our process or our response. It's naturally you get variance in date sets, and some months the incidents are just naturally further away from fire stations. That's all it was in February.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. Let's we look at it every time, but it's just useful because this was the whole year's data, isn't it? So brilliant. We can move on to the next slide.
Okay, thank you. So the last slide, so the kind of third area of our business delivery is protection. So how we kind of protect the built environment and premises that people work in to make sure they're safe. So one of the big changes the service will make or is making at this point in time is a change to our risk-based intervention programme. So basically that's where a fire and rescue service will use data and create a model to try and work out what the highest risk properties are within the county area, and then proactively go and audit them to look for deficiencies or any issues within those things. So there's been a lot of changes in guidance from the National Fire Chiefs Council over the last couple of years. A lot more improvements in the data that's used to inform that process. So that will go live. Manager Hurst couldn't be with us because he's had an urgent matter, unfortunately, but certainly in the future, he'd be happy to report the changes and improvements that are made there. So for today, there's some kind of reporting of changes in activity levels. I think it's important to point out that we haven't pushed to do more protection work over the last year. There was more emphasis on improving. So a number of the station plans within emergency response over the last year were trying to divert crews' attention more towards prevention activity than protection. So this reduction in kind of output level isn't a reduction in performance. It's that we've kind of prioritised other areas, if that makes sense. So some of the indicators that will come to future OPMs will be some more qualitative analysis of how effective that protection activity is going to be. What percentage of our audits, for example, determine unsatisfactory outcomes, how many prohibition notices we need to do, prosecutions, etc., etc. So not a great deal to report on for 2025 to 26, quite a stable picture in terms of our outputs and outcomes. but I will take any questions if there are any on protection.
Just really to understand the significant fire safety check change, I assume that is to do with a different kind of regulations that you're complying with, but if you could just say a little bit more about that and whether or not some of that fire safety check would include the work the service is doing around responding to automatic fire alarms and trying to prevent those. Does that fall under protection or prevention?
Protection. So the fire safety check is a kind of lower level audit, if that makes sense. So we've done a lot of upskilling of our operational crews to become competent within level 2 qualifications, level 3 qualifications in fire safety. So that doesn't qualify them and wouldn't be appropriate for them to go and do high level kind of consultations with businesses or regulatory activity. It's more of a way of kind of getting into property and identifying issues and then referring them on to the specialist teams from there. So I guess essentially it's a lot more kind of eyes and ears, getting into people's properties and businesses to make sure they're safe, and then the ability to refer any issues to the specialist central team. So a lot of that fire safety check enhancement increase has come from now we have upskilled operational crews. So they're having a lot more impact and they're able to refer issues, identify issues, even when they're doing their normal kind of incident response as well.
Great. I've got no more questions on that slide. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it. So there will be further, as I said, quality assurance done. Future packs will contain kind of more of the wider organisational benefits, but we are able to report information on prevention, protection and response at this time. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Ben. Very comprehensive. As always, from the service in terms of those assurance pictures. And I think we're now moving on, apologies, I'm overrunning, to the thematic topic presentation, which Gary is going to present, I think. Is this your first time presenting, Gary?
It's my first time presenting this meeting, I would say.
Oh, is it? I thought you'd been at a meeting before. In which case,
no.
Welcome to the online public meeting. So, yeah. Gary, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly before you kick off with your presentation?
Yeah, no, apologies, Deputy Mayor. I was being slightly glib. I was saying I have presented before, just not at this meeting. So I think.
Oh, sorry.
But yeah, we're in good shape, and I did make the last one of these OPM, so I do have a bit of an insight into that one. So I am now sharing my screen, so I hope that's visible to participants. And I would also like to welcome Leanne Consett, our Director of People Services, to the call as well, who has joined us for this section to provide context and also support with any queries or questions. Now, bit of a weighty presentation, Deputy Mayor, so I'll work my way through it steadily. Obviously, I appreciate your desire and rightly to kind of question as we go. But the first sort of 2 or 3 slides will be a bit contextual. But then as we get into the main body of it, I'll pause at the end of each one just so that if required, we can address some of the questions around it. And if not, we'll gather them all at the end. So, starting us off, I think to set some context, it makes sense to reference our Fire and Rescue Plan, or FRP, as it's abbreviated to, published last year. And that sits with a runtime of 4 years to 2029. And it obviously, as you can see on screen there, sets our commitment to ultimately, and this is relevant to this presentation, ensuring that we have the right people with the right skills, equipment and training to do their jobs effectively and safely. Our wider commitment to the modernisation of fire stations and facilities. A really important commitment to us as an organisation is our innovation commitment, which is around research and incorporating new technologies. Culturally, we want to ensure that we foster development opportunities for all our staff, which are both inclusive and progressive. And ultimately, and we'll touch on this as we move through the presentation, deliver long-term cultural change to the organisation through the Framework for Change project, and alongside that, consistent with our existing national commitments, promote outstanding behaviours in line with the National Core Code of Ethics. And I think ultimately, as part of that picture, through those commitments, we aim to ensure that we're attracting, recruiting and retaining a workforce that is more representative of the people of York and North Yorkshire. So to that end, alongside that, the fire and rescue plan, we have our community risk management plan, or CRMP, and ultimately that will always serve to us, and I hope to the communities and yourself, as a roadmap as to how we manage local risk. A key focus of that area includes strengthening partnership working, enhancing our team training, and as touched on in the fire and rescue plan, reviewing fire stations and specialist vehicles to ensure that they remain fit for purpose. Tried to provide here in terms of the visuals is that it is maybe given an indication of some of the early progress that we've made against those areas of focus. Now, one of those, and it builds on the presentation that was provided at the last online public meeting, where we heard from the on-call station manager, who is responsible fundamentally for building and cultivating the environment for our on-call staff. We've made that role permanent, which we think is a really good way to galvanise that commitment to that large body of our workforce. And as we touched on in the previous presentation, talking about availability of on-call, a big part of that will be about how we recruit, retain and manage that part of our workforce. Alongside that, we've also made some improvements in our digital learning experience, where we've employed a dedicated e-learning coordinator and updated our systems, which gives us a better base for ensuring that digital experience for our staff and our ability to develop and coordinate that is done in a more cohesive way. Alongside that, a piece of work that's ongoing at the moment is our review of corporate workwear, which aligns really strongly to our cultural review. It was something that came through in a lot of the feedback that we got from our staff around how they perceive themselves, their role in the organisation, and that sense of an organisational identity. And finally, in terms of systemic stuff, we've developed our HR management system, which again provides a sense of stability and support to how we manage that aspect of the people part of our organisation, which is, of course, a huge focus for us.
Thank you. Just before you move on, just wanted to say that obviously, you know, this is a people business, because we can't do anything very much without the people in it. But for us in our patch, which people, if they watched the previous meeting, will know, we are very dependent on our on-call firefighters, which means that the kind of HR processes and the management of all of that is probably very different to what people might imagine from another type of workplace. These are people who have substantive jobs and who are on-call firefighters outside of that, which means that the HR processes that sit around that are different to what you might otherwise have in another kind of agency organisation. And also why the partnership working that you just referenced is so important. I think sometimes this stuff can sound dry, but actually incredibly important in terms of the delivery of the fire and rescue service in our patch.
No, 100%, Mayor. I think you know, if you consider that, you know, half of our response workforce are on-call firefighters, that's a higher percentage than you might see in a number of services across the country. And like you say, part of what makes that effective, and it probably ties back into what we've spoken about availability of on-call, and that's sitting around about 68%. Then we want to make sure that we build that, and part of doing that is ensuring that those on-call firefighters that work for us already, that we streamline and ensure that their support, their intervention in terms of HR measures, and the whole staff wellbeing and welfare piece that goes around that, it matches appropriately to the ask of what we bring from them. And I think it's also, as you see, you've painted a really good and important picture there, that these are members of the community, so they're in the community themselves and they're responding and protecting it, but they're also parents, they are employees, they might run their own businesses, they'll have a range of other things that put demands on their time, and we ask a lot of them, as does their community. So it's really important that we do everything that we can to have systems that are not a barrier to how they manage that and how they process through it.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, and I realise I'm slightly labouring the point, but given that we talked a bit about the increasing precept that people were paying and the impact on all the other stuff that we were talking about in the previous slides, I think the other side of that is one of the things I think that additional investment has enabled is some investment on this side of things that actually enables all the other stuff to work. So I think that just in the context of the other slide deck, it's kind of important that the reason this stuff is important is because it enables the other stuff to happen, and to happen better and more effectively. But I'll let you carry on. Sorry.
No, listen, absolutely. I appreciate the intervention, because it does make sense. You know, I think it's really important that a lot of this rightly is invisible at the front line and is invisible to the communities, but it's actually the network that wraps around that piece, and it allows us to deliver that kind of frontline service, our statutory duty to respond, done it through a large body of staff who are on call. So as you say, having the systems in place that supports that allows us to do it to the best of our ability. I spoke obviously there around our CRMP, our Community Risk Management Plan, and there are some people areas within that are both focuses for the organisation and some achievements. So what I'll try to, I suppose, pervade through this slide is that sense of what's important to us and what we're doing around that. So one of the key areas for us at the moment is reducing sickness as a key priority for the service. Ultimately, long-term sickness and modified duties is something that will always impact on our ability to deliver the service, especially in our whole-time provision, as I said, which makes up 50% of what we're doing. But it's also impactful in terms of allowing support to be in place for those firefighters, both on an on-call and a whole-time background, to allow us, if they've missed a period of work through sickness or injury, that we're working hard to bring them back and do that in a supportive way as possible. So what we've done on the people aspects of that is strengthen joint working between our HR support teams and our health and wellbeing team to ensure that there's consistent management and early intervention. Alongside that, some other work that we're doing is attendance and performance workshops, where we've got sessions delivered by line managers and for line managers, laterally introducing a strong practical focus, including improving record keeping and skills, maintaining effective support plans. So all of that, we believe, ties into ensuring that those that are returning to work or have been off have a good support network around them. On top of that, we've added in some whole-time and on-call manager roadshows. These are delivered to all our line managers to reinforce the expectations and provide some guidance on managing attendance. So all of that ties into the desire within the organisation to ensure that we are making the most of the staff that are here and supporting them back to work if they are off on a period of absence. So alongside that, we're done some significant work in developing, supporting talent and the management of talent. And like you say, Deputy Mayor, this is a good example of lots of things that sit in the background but ultimately change the experience for our staff and also the environment in which they work. We recognise that a strong talent management approach is really essential for building a stable and capable workforce and also ensuring that the service can meet its current and its future demands. Over the last 2 or 3 years, a significant amount of work has been undertaken to establish both the foundations for this, and it remains a continued area of focus. And alongside that, and we'll see it later on in terms of the statistics around it, a key component of strengthening talent management is our now refreshed PDPR, so Personal Development Review process. It's just completed its second cycle, and the aim of that is to ensure an open, fair and consistent approach. We use the strengths framework in the service to assess our aspiring leaders, which is a fair and transparent methodology to ensure that we are giving people the opportunity to express the best selves when they go for the opportunity for promotion and to lead in the organisation. And ultimately, the direction of travel is towards, we hope, identifying individuals who are both ready for promotion and capable of doing it, rather than simply that process of kind of attending and taking part. We think this shift gives us a more robust, incredible pipeline of talent coming through the organisation. And alongside that talent framework, we've got our leadership development work and are in the process of going live later this month, we expect, but certainly in the next 4 weeks, the introduction of the new Leadership Academy. And these are developments that will help, we hope, embed a structure, an evidence-based approach and the best way to identify and develop talent across the organisation. And the last part I kind of really wanted to focus in on that is the framework for change, which should be, we hope, quite overt to our staff, and also it's stuff that we've spoken about previously in these public meetings. We partnered with the University of Huddersfield to create a cultural change framework, a leadership charter and a practical toolkit, which has been developed with our staff over the last year. And building on that success, we've secured further funding and launched the Culture Spark, which is an advanced sector-wide culture change survey. Alongside that, we've done some first-line and mid-level leadership programmes, which will be delivered jointly across both ourselves and our colleagues in the police. and alongside that, some improved workforce planning and the recruitment of 64 old-time firefighters across the last calendar year for which we had metrics. And finally, as I said, the Fire Culture Monitor Survey closed this month, and the results of that will shape, we hope, our understanding of the experience of our members of staff, both in terms of the launch of Framework for Change and as we move through that phase. So I'll pause at that.
Sorry,
no, I'm happy to speak about that. So I'll just pause around that one if there's questions from yourself.
Yeah, just a question about the cultural change framework, really, just in terms of, particularly if you're one of our on-call firefighters, where actually people aren't, day to day, they're not spending their time on station, they're in their substantive employment. So just what the cultural change framework, sorry, I can't get my words out, what the cultural change framework would mean for those firefighters and how that might be perhaps different for a whole-time firefighter?
I'll initially respond and then obviously open out to the chief and the senior team if there's anything they want to add in. But to my mind, there's probably two aspects to that. One is how we might access, influence and engage with an on-call firefighter might be different from a whole-time colleague. However, the environment in which they work, the culture that they experience when they come to the workplace, and ultimately the combination of both of them to create that experience that they have when they're here, to my mind, should be the same. So although we might use different methodology because we recognise our access to an on-call firefighter might be limited to, for example, between 2 and 3 hours a week if we include their training night where they have other activities that they need to do, and also that kind of wider sense alongside incidents they attend, fundamentally when they're in a workplace, be that an on-call fire station or a whole-time one, and their workplace, which also extends to being at incidents and beyond, and when they're engaging with our communities, all of that, our expectations and where we want to be is that that cultural environment is as positive, as appropriate, and as suitable in an on-call environment as it is for our whole-time staff. So I think my take on that is that the methodology, the techniques and our access to how we engage with and shape it will be different for on-call staff, but the end result should be that the experience is fairly similar.
Great. Did anyone, I've lost, oh, there we go, they're back. Did anyone else want to come in on that? Otherwise, I think we can move on to the next slide.
Sorry, my camera's gone all funny. I'm over there.
We can hear you. There we go.
I think the Deputy, sorry, thank you. Gary's articulated it very well there. Our point being, Deputy Mayor, that whoever or wherever you are employed in the service, ultimately, our framework for change, our leadership charter, our behavioural charter gives a bandwidth of behaviours that we expect within the service. And that bandwidth hasn't been designed by us, it's been designed by our own staff as to what they expect to see both in themselves and also their colleagues. And our commitment to the public, of course, is that we are pushing this through the organisation. The people they experience as a result of that is that they will have positive interactions with people that are employed by the service, whether you are on call or whether you're a whole time. What I would say, of course, is that we see our over 50% of our workforce with 2 hours a week. So Gary is exactly right insofar as there are different engagement methods. What I would hope, of course, is that the primary employers out there that reflect the society that North Yorkshire is not only in, but represents the on-call firefighters we employ, that they are also pushing the boundaries for culture and looking for overall improvement. We are a part of that and we'll continue to do what we need to do. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. We can carry on.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. So, yeah, through the presentation, obviously, aiming to speak, obviously, fundamentally around the people aspects, which we've touched on a little bit, and how we shape that environment. But ultimately, it's about having a safe and effective workforce. So one of the areas that we'll touch on now, it talks about our commitment and our statutory duty to report injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrences. So that's RIDDOR in this case, that's the overarching legislation. But fundamentally, this is really just to have a look at what that looks like in terms of practice. Obviously, under this banner, there are statutory levels at which we would report, but our aim, and to be really clear, both culturally and in terms of a culture of safety and how we manage the organisation, we want the numbers always to be zero, because that means that we have the safest workforce and safest environment that we can. but we also recognise that firefighting as a practical activity is an inherently dangerous activity, and our responsibility is to ensure that we put in every system, every piece of training, every piece of equipment and the processes that ensure that our staff are as safe as possible. Now, in terms of those reportables, looking at the last fiscal year, so 1st of April to the 31st of March this year, we had 8 RIDDOR reportable injuries, a half and half split both in terms of at incidents and during training. So we had 4 at incidents and 4 that were during training. To give you an indication, and whilst we would never speak about the specifics of these because they involve individuals, 7 of those were reported because the injury prevented the person from working for more than 7 days. So that's a trigger underneath the legislation. And 1 was a specified injury, which in this case was a broken wrist, which means it met the criterion for being reportable. Alongside that, we also had 2 RIDDOR reportable breathing apparatus dangerous occurrences. I need to stress that's the wording from the Act and the legislation there. These occurred in an irrespirable atmosphere. So in other words, these took place either in training or an incident where the environment was either smoke logged or not safe to breathe. And the 2 instances that happened is that 1 of the sets went into free flow and 1 had an uncontrolled loss of air. Now, to give the specifics of that, again, as I say, without talking about the individuals, what that means is that there was an issue with the breathing apparatus set, which is the respiratory protective equipment that our firefighters wear in any environment where it's hazardous to their health in terms of how they breathe. 1 went into free flow, which means it continues to deliver air constantly, which is not what it should do. And the other one was an uncontrolled loss of air, which means it's got air dropping out of the system. So I realise I've probably delved into the fairly technical aspect of these incidents, but it gives you an understanding of the level of monitoring and the level of and the standards of safety that we always seek to enforce. And these are a kind of overview of the kind of RIDDOR position of instances that occurred in that period. So I'll just pause there to see if there's any questions.
Just a couple of questions really. Obviously firefighters, it's a dangerous job, which I think the public recognises, which I assume is why this is regulated in the way that it is, and rightly so. I also, just whether you can just clarify, I assume the trade union is engaged on these kind of incidents on a regular basis. This would be the kind of area I would have thought that the trade union would be involved in quite actively. And then, just if you can confirm that. And then just my further question was just in terms of the breathing apparatus occurrences, I'm aware, although the public may not be, that there is new breathing apparatus that has now come in to the service. Were these incidents on the old equipment or the new equipment?
Okay, I'll take that in reverse order. And on the second one, I'll need to lean into my colleagues to work out in terms of the timing. The reason I'm saying that I'll need to just check is because I'm conscious that it's in that period that we have introduced and done the final phasing of the delivery of the new breathing apparatus. So it may well be that we can't determine whether that was the case. Statistically, it's probably more likely that it would have been on the older ones. However, I don't have the specifics of the instances. So I'll just pause for a second to see Damien.
Damien seems to know.
Yes, can you hear me, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Yes, so with those, with the breathing apparatus occurrences, both were investigated, both were down to the maintenance, so they had water within the set face mask. So it was due to routine maintenance why each went into that. We will have to look at if that was the new set or the old set, but they didn't provide me with that detail when we were putting forward the presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if it's okay to then just come back in around the Fire Brigade Union, which is our largest representative body in relation to uniformed staff, although there is the FRSA, which is predominantly for on-call staff who also have a voice with us. What I would say, there's a number of layers and steps where we would engage with the FBU, and across the UK, the position is that the employers and the FBU have a shared priority, which is safe and effective firefighters, and so it's an area where we have a huge amount of common ground. So practically, if we have an instance that results in either the potential of recurrence or an injury to a firefighter, very, very early we will be alongside the notifications that you would expect and the processes that wrap around that, we will be engaging with the FBU to ensure that they can offer either support and also be part of the process. And secondly, in terms of our robust processes around reporting, investigating, and then organisational and operational learning that arises from any kind of adverse instance, then the Fire Brigade Union is an intrinsic part of that from day one.
Great, thank you. We can move on to the next one.
All right, thank you. So, still kind of focusing around the people aspects. This gives a bit of an overview of where we're at in terms of staff engagement. So survey results are from the early part of last year, because that was the last time that this type of staff engagement was done. However, obviously there is an ongoing piece of work around our framework for change where there's a huge amount of engagement. But we have a 29% response rate from that, where 197 employees responded, and we use the People Insights platform to give a kind of more detailed analysis, and that sits behind it and drills down into specific questions, and then by demographics, including role, department, duty system, grade and length of service, as well as the kind of wider stats that we would look at, where we have gender, age and ethnic origin. So the results are being prepared just now, and they're now being looked alongside the initial framework for change data, so that'll help focus our activity around the piece. So I think probably the parts to focus on, as you can see on the slide there, is that you can see some real favourable responses around areas that you would expect, which is that you've got proud to see that they work for the service, care about the future of the organisation, still want to be working with us in a couple of years' time, recommend to a friend to work with the organisation, and also that kind of last part, which is really important, that working here makes me want to do the best work that I can. And this is important to us because it is very much reflective of the kind of culture and an organisation that we want it to be. But that gives you a bit of an overview of the engagement within the service.
Great. Can I just ask, I've got a slight concern about just the response rate at 29%. I can see that it's the same as it was 2 years before that. I just wondered what we were doing. 29% and employment of, I don't know how many, there's 700 employed by the service.
It's 179 responded, Deputy Mayor, just so you know.
Yeah, so just whether or not that, it feels quite low to me, but maybe that whether there are other fire and rescue services that do this kind of thing, whether or not for an on-call service this is actually quite good, or actually whether or not we should be perhaps seeing whether or not there's anything we need to do to particularly engage colleagues who may have less time to engage in this kind of thing.
Leanne, I'm going to pause there. I just wondered if there's anything. I know that the Chief might want to come in first. I don't know if that's before or after.
Well, I'm happy to jump in here. Thank you. So, Deputy Mayor, one of the things that the fire service is famous for is surveying its staff, and we are always very conscious about that. That can go into overload with our staff. Whilst we've been doing these, at certain points we have paused them because of the framework for change and the enormous response that we've had from staff within that space. Over 50, nearly 60% of staff engaged in the framework for change. We have consistently seen a fairly tepid response to these surveys. I'll let Leanne come in with the details, but ultimately we are doing more and we are doing everything we can. But while staff have been focused on responding to and participating in the framework for change, that has been the core focus here. But I'll let Leanne give her perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Leanne. Thank you for coming to the meeting.
Hi. I think I don't have the specifics on other fire services in terms of what their response rate is, because I think we're quite unique in terms of our volume of on-call. But in discussing it with People Insights, who were the provider, generally anything above 20% response rates for surveys is considered fairly positive. So as an industry standard across, that was felt by People Insights to be a fairly positive one. And I think that goes with a lot of other surveys in other sectors as well. And they do survey right across various sectors. So I haven't got the details on other fire services. I would have to go away and look into that. But we do have that uniqueness in terms of the on-call aspect. But 29% was felt to be quite positive in the general wider scope of surveys.
Brilliant. Okay. JD?
Just a final point on there, Deputy Mayor. I had forgotten this. This survey was also run at the same time as the NYFRS survey, and we did get a very on that survey, which the HMI noted was above other services. So again, we've got 3 effectively competing surveys running, all necessary, but this was ultimately the lower tier one that was responded to. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. Consultationitis is a problem for lots of people. So yes, I appreciate that. I think what might be useful for next time might be to see whether some of our comparable fire and rescue services, particularly those with a lot of on-call, so someone like Cumbria maybe, just whether or not they have done something and what their data tells them in terms of responses, just so that we've got some assurance that there isn't a particular problem in our patch. I have no idea whether that's particularly low. I love filling in surveys, but that's not the case for everyone.
Deputy Mayor, which on the back of us designing and working with the University of Huddersfield on this space, you'll remember that another fire and rescue service has now stepped on board to undertake the same as well. So they are going through, just doing HMI, so they are in a very similar space to us. So we'll do that comparison and come back to you from there. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you. That's fantastic. We can move on to the next slide.
Thank you. So building on that picture of ensuring that our staff are safe, this heading is operational licence, and effectively that is the revalidation and reaffirmation that our supervisory managers and specifically appliance and incident commanders, so those that go to fires and are in charge, are competent to lead and command operational incidents. The operational licence is effectively the suite of risk critical qualifications for that particular operational role, and an individual must have the full suite to be operational in that role. So to give you an overview of that, our data shows that 55 operational staff are showing out of date with their operational licence, and that's an improvement of 17% on the previous financial year. But as is reassured there in terms of the slide, there is a constant piece of work reviewing this information and then aligning it with our data sources, which is in this case Firewatch, which is the brand name for the data source that provides our operational and staff information. But our training teams maintain a register of those that are out of date, and that's constantly updated, and they ensure that our efforts in terms of training is targeted towards bringing that down. And in terms of the people aspect of that, our district managers are encouraged to both check that information is correct, tie in with training and our people services to correct the information, and also to encourage those members of staff to complete that. So that there's a wider kind of picture there that there is the breathing apparatus aspects, the emergency response driving, and for those, as you can see in the definitions at the bottom there, where we have responding officers, then that's that kind of wider picture at station manager above. But the top right of the graphic there gives you an indication of all the qualifications that can potentially make up that suite. So it's everything, as I say, from BA to driving to incident command levels. So it gives you that kind of overall picture, and it's an area where we continue to focus because it's our assurance organisationally that our staff are safe to operate in what is, as we've touched on previously, obviously a dangerous environment, and doing so equipped with the right training is the best way to move that forward. So I'll pause there to see if there's any questions on operational licence.
Just really what the reasons are for people falling out of date, whether it's because they're off sick, whether or not it's because of other things, and just whether or not there are any kind of, for want of a better word, carrots and sticks for this process. So incentives to do it quickly, or is there a point at which not having done it becomes a particular problem?
Yeah, again, I'll happily open up to my colleagues in the team here if they have any additional part. I think that, as you probably touched on, there's a range of factors that contribute to it, because you can have, for example, if someone is on a long-term sickness absence, then that'll impact their ability to be in the cycle to catch them within date. But obviously, when they return to work and they're doing their phased element, we can potentially have members of staff that are in that, so they have returned to work, but they might not be operational yet. So that'll contribute to it. You will have individual reasons that it impacts on that piece, and like you say, what we do and commit to as an organisation is a blend of carrot and stick, as you would expect. That fundamentally there is plenty within the personal development reviews for the staff, their supervisory managers, and our ability to maintain them, all of those aspects that encourage them to complete the training that's required, but there will be a number of factors. Ben, do you want to come in, obviously, with your own take on it?
Yeah, no, just to add to what the Dep said there, Deputy Mayor, this is an area that we track extensively through Training Managers Forum. The majority of staff who fall out of ticket or not yet booked on courses are either staff who are absent or on modified duties. This is an area that, as well as rated good from NYFRS at the last inspection, we had an internal audit of last year as well, who found they went through all our training records. justification of all, and we've got a good assurance rating for all the core competencies within the operational licence. It's purely about scheduling people who are returning to work on modified duties, or new starters who haven't yet on the on-call, haven't yet done all their acquisition courses. It's not that people haven't booked on courses or fallen out of date as a compliance issue, if that makes sense.
It does, thank you. And just one small point of clarification for whoever can tell me. The bar chart with all the different types of licenses, operational wearer, fire compartment, fire behaviour, is that the number out of date on that chart? Is that what that tells me?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank
you.
That gives you your total number.
Yeah, that's fine. We can move on to the next slide.
Thank you. So kind of building on that picture, and that's about how our systems that are there to ensure our staff are developed, trained and safe. This one touches on PDPR, which is Personal Development Performance Reviews. Probably in other language could be considered appraisals, but it's much wider than that in terms of being focused on the development of staff. And to give an indication of that, it looks like there's a kind of picture there of where we're at, and this is, like anything else, is always going to be a snapshot in time. So this is taken at the end of the last financial year, so now a number of weeks ago, but essentially, as you can see there, based on the number of employees who work for the service, including both those who have both a whole-time and on-call role, we would expect to see approximately 770 PDPRs in the system. At that point, that count was 548, which means we have in excess of 200 staff, around about 29% of the workforce, that didn't have a PDPR in the system. And it's very similar to what we've spoken about previously around the record under the licensing. The reasons for that can include absence. They may have a recent start date. They may be a dual contract member of staff, or it might be an access issue. However, it is an area, again, that we would like to see that number come down, as you would expect. Clearly, utopia on that is that 100% of staff have that development record in place. But of those 548, 33% of them are still due, which means the review is between the line manager and the employee is either still to be completed or uploaded. And at that snapshot, 67% in the process or are complete for the year. So that, as you'll have picked up and is shown on the screen there, the PDPR year runs with the fiscal year. So we're now into that where we're now reset, and effectively we're in the phase of the year where all of those remaining ones, if there are gaps, should be being closed off. The new objectives for this the coming fiscal year shall be set for staff. And I would like to offer the reassurance that part of our drive and focus of this year is to ensure that we have a higher completion rate against each of those, because we do see it as an intrinsic tool in ensuring both that the staff have a voice, but also there is that key relationship between them and their line manager to ensure their objectives are set and they're able to deliver accordingly. So I'll pause there if you have any questions around that.
Not particularly. Is this something that HMIC look at when they come in? I assume these are the kinds of issues that they would pick up during the inspection process.
Yeah, I'll just Ben, when you come.
Yeah, they do, Deputy Mayor. So just for a bit of kind of further analysis of this, the majority of this is definitely an area we need to improve on as an organisation. The vast majority of the ones that haven't been updated yet or logged are for the on-call. It's very challenging at some of our on-call stations. There might be one crew or watch manager there and as many as 12 firefighters. So when, based on the fact they have just one drill night once a week, 2-hour window, what we've asked them to do is not just do a tokenistic update, make sure it's meaningful. It just means that some of the timescales and deadlines we had applied, which is learning for us, we're looking at reviewing the kind of the tight window for PDPR, but there are some to work through, perfectly understandable reasons with the on-call.
Yeah, fine. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ben. All of those factors are always going, and the same with the conversations that we've had previously in terms of availability. That we appreciate that there's a kind of holistic piece there, that either if we don't have the right environment, if we have poor systems in place in terms of how we get people back to work, or if we don't have the right systems to monitor and track it, all of them can negatively impact on availability. And a big part of that would be about sickness absence. So the data provided is for the calendar year. That's the way that we track these metrics rather than the financial year. But effectively, as you can see on the screen there, it shows a constant picture for long-term sickness with slight month-to-month variations across the year. Short-term sickness, as you would expect, given its nature, shows more fluctuations, and there is a noticeable peak in January and a further rise from October onwards. So for clarity, this is the last calendar year. And both of those, in terms of feedback from people, colleagues, and from our own operational experience, align with what we tend to see in terms of typical seasonal illness patterns. I think what I would say at this point, though, is that what we do recognise is that, and Damien in his role now in terms of that kind of wider emergency response piece and the management of the frontline staff, we recognise that there's a real focus for us around managing short and long-term sickness. The processes that we work in partnership with our colleagues in people services to ensure that that's managed as tightly as possible, because fundamentally our ability to deliver the core service of the organisation and that kind of impact in terms of availability are all heavily influenced by our short and long-term sickness, because fundamentally we are a people business, and a biggest part of that is our ability to have people at their work well and able to carry out their roles. But as I say, it is a focus for us over the next 12 months, because we recognise, as I say, in partnership with people services, that anything we can do to drive that down will impact on our ability to provide that kind of availability piece right across it. I'll pause there. Damien, if you don't.
I was just going to ask, before Damien comes in, I was just going to ask how we compare to other fire and rescue services, and also just whether there's any differential within the types of long or short-term sickness between, for example, physical sickness and maybe exhaustion, stress, those kind of things, maybe mental health more widely, and just whether or not how we compare in terms of that analysis to other, again, comparable fire and rescue services. It's always going to be difficult when people have got other substantive employment, which will impact on whether they're available for this, but may not be the cause of it. So just really to understand how we kind of compare to other people.
Leanne, do you want to come in on any of that? If not, I see I can lead in as well.
So we have got, in comparison to the national pictures, some of the highest rates of absence at the moment, which is why it is a key area of focus for us. We are currently averaging in about 10.75 days absence per person. The average in the fire sector is 9.83, I believe, but we are at the top end of that table. So this is where it is a key area of focus for us. In terms of the breakdown between the different types of absence, there is a lot more physical absences in the fire because of the nature of the role amongst firefighters, although we do see a lot of mental health as well, but physical aspects is a strong one. One of the things that I have noticed is that because we have got an ongoing review, which was alluded to earlier by the DEP, of long-term sickness and modified duties, we have seen where we are starting to take some performance action against those on modified duties who perhaps, for example, haven't been passing their fitness test, has resulted in further sicknesses and them going absent. But that is because of the robust approach that is now being taken to address some of those performance issues. I think that is something that we anticipated, in that sometimes things do get a little bit worse before they get better in some of these things when you start trying to address some of the performance issues. But there is a programme of work in hand to work through these things, and we are working with the FBU as well on considering whether we can introduce a capabilities procedure, because at the moment we do only have the discipline procedure to utilise. We don't have a capabilities procedure agreed, but we are in active discussions with the FBU about bringing that in to hopefully provide a potentially more supportive framework to assist in the managing of the long-term and short-term sickness trends.
Yeah, okay, that's yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, it probably ties in relatively nicely with that because it clearly paints a similar picture. Wellbeing and welfare. As you can see up on screen there, there are a number of initiatives and efforts that we do because we've got, you know, two aspects of responsibility here. One of those ultimately is that the organisation is involved in firefighting activities which can be impactful for the well-being and welfare of those that respond, but also in terms of what we've spoken about around that piece around ensuring that staff are as fit and as well and are as supported as possible. All of this plays into that narrative. But we do have well-being sessions which promote early intervention and reduce the likelihood of issues escalating. Well-being pledge, which we think helps to embed a shared language and understanding of resilience across the workforce. In terms of referrals, we're aiming to reduce the barriers to support, encourage self-referral and ensure managers can act quickly. And the last piece that you can see up on screen there, when I spoke about that kind of traumatic impact, is TRIM is a programme, trauma risk management, which provides confidential peer support from trained practitioners to assist our colleagues to recognise normal reactions to trauma, aiding recovery and guide them to the right piece of support they need. So conscious of time, I'll probably be relatively brief on that, but that probably gives you a bit of an overview of wellbeing and welfare investment by the organisation. So we'll just pause if there's any questions.
Just really what happens to ensure that staff are able to access those kind of sessions and that support, and whether what's incentive or kind of encouragement do people get? How much do you have to ask, or is it how much of it goes in what direction?
Yeah, so again, I'll pause at the end of this if there's peers that wish to come in on this, but I think ultimately when it comes to the kind of wider picture, we have a kind of three tiers of access. Organisationally, we try and set as clear an environment and limit any barriers to access as possible, ensuring we use every form of communication that we have available to us to ensure that staff, either through physical notices, through electronic communication, through face-to-face intervention, we have that kind of saying, here is the wider picture, that we have those processes that support it so they know what the resources are. The second tier is their direct engagement with their peers and managers, because that ultimately will always be impactful in terms of ensuring there is both two-way monitoring and encouragement and ensuring they get referred to the right pathway. And the final piece is that individual responsibility. So if we're able to ensure that through education and training and the systems that are available to our staff, they understand what that looks like, that puts them in the best place to access any kind of support systems that are beneficial. And like the Chief has already said, part of that is influenced by recognising the heavy predominance of on-call staff, and therefore we should recognise that this impacts both in terms of their role with us and their family and primary employment. So I'll just pause in case there's anything Ben wishes to add to that.
Yeah, you've covered a lot of it, Deb. Just to say we actively support this. Prevention is better than the cure in a lot of these areas. So there's a lot of role modelling and support people attending this, and as Gary mentioned there as well, even some of the more practical elements such as enabling station level Outlook accounts. So a lot of these appointments, the webinars can be pre-booked in people's calendars. There's some really innovative approaches in North Yorkshire, things like ear acupuncture. I've tried myself, was really good, and role model that approach. So yeah, really good suite of options there for our staff to access. We'd like to see them used more, but certainly modelled, and where there are barriers around IT solutions, we have looked to solve them as well.
Brilliant, thank you, that's great.
Okay, so we've spoken a fair bit around the steps that we take. The next few slides, and as I say, I'll be as brief as possible, recognising that we are operating against a timeline. Give you a bit of an overview of the kind of reporting and the kind of composition and data aspects. So probably important to recognise, you can see in that kind of overall composition there, with regards to gender, women now make up approximately 10% of our whole-time and on-call firefighters, and that has demonstrated a fairly consistent rise in representation, and with staff from an ethnic minority background accounting for around 4% of the workforce. Now, whilst gender and ethnic diversity do remain below the communities served in terms of level, we are seeing in terms of year-on-year recruit trends a steady improvement. What that looks like in practice, in 2025, we had 6 women join the service and 4 people from an ethnic minority background. In 2024, that number was 3 and 2. So a 100% increase in both of them. It is small numbers, and we recognise that. But again, ultimately, our desire is to continue to see that improving picture. And whilst some female firefighters have retired or transferred to other services, currently we are seeing a higher female intake and a higher male leavers. So it is indicative of a continually improving gender split across the operational post. And we will do all aspects of kind of proactive work as we can to encourage those that are women and from a minority ethnic background to the point of recruitment, to ensure that we don't have barriers to them accessing that process, because ultimately we want to make sure everybody has the best opportunity to seek a role within the service. Comparable data from 2022, as you can see there, indicated at that point 8.3% of our whole-time firefighters were women, and 9.54% were on-call firefighters. So, as I say, overall a marginal improvement, but a steady one nonetheless. And I'll pause there if there's any specific questions.
Not just a couple of things. One was just to ask, just particularly under the ethnicity data, there's relatively large numbers of, although the absolute numbers may not be large, of not unknown ethnicity. I just wondered what the reasons for that were, and whether or not that was just an anomaly that could be corrected, which might be helpful, just because it just creates a sense of uncertainty. And then probably more significantly, I just wanted to this is not something that particularly bothers me, but it may be quite important in terms of the public assurance. In our community survey, which is live at the moment and is closing at the weekend, there have been some comments raised around whether or not hiring particular groups of people into firefighting is box ticking rather than capability. I am absolutely convinced, given the firefighters that I have met across the service, that that is not the case. And certainly I've met some phenomenal firefighters across the service, but just wonder whether there's anything that you could say in terms of assurance that there is positive action to ensure that we have a service that represents the community rather than discrimination against other people who want to be firefighters. I'm sure that's not the case, certainly not what I think, but I just wanted to share it because it is something that has been coming through the community survey, and I thought it might be useful in terms of wider assurances. I think, JD, you wanted to come in, and then Leanne?
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor. Look, I can categorically assure yourself and the public that there isn't any discrimination in that way. We do positively look to ensure that we have equal access for everybody. So all members of the community, we seek to work with them, ensure that they can equally access the recruitment phases and then compete within a competitive process. When you are in the competitive process, the same process applies to everybody. What we do is work with people before and during to make sure that they have the best opportunity to have the best outcome. But then ultimately, the recruitment, as we've seen, we are doing something really well here because we are seeing increasing diversity, we're increasing women and ethnic minorities into the service. But ultimately, North Yorkshire, we are ultimately representative of North Yorkshire itself and will continue to be so. But there is no discrimination actively ongoing in this organisation where it comes to recruitment. Thank you.
Thank you. Like I said, this is not my view, but I thought I would make the point because other people had been making it. Leanne, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I will echo what JD has said there, as the Chief has said there, in relation to the there is no discrimination. We have been taking positive action to try and encourage that diverse group of applicants, which has raised some questions. We have had some matters raised to us about, is positive action positive discrimination? It absolutely isn't positive discrimination because they all have to meet the same standards. The positive action is encouraging and trying to get applicants to understand what it means in terms of by have a go days as one example, where they can come and see what the fitness tests are like and do it in a safe group where it may only be female applicants undertaking that to provide that environment where they don't feel as judged. And that has, we know, raised some criticism from some quarters, but it is positive action, not positive discrimination, because they still have to meet the same standard. In relation to the reporting numbers, that is an area of focus to try and encourage people to report, because that is It's a self-reported area from our work for all new recruits coming in. Through our recruitment processes, we are capturing the data, and so it is all recorded. So it is predominantly people who have been with us a long time, and they have determined not to declare their ethnicity, but we are working to encourage that. It is an active area under our EDI strategy to get more knowledge around that area.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And look, if you spend any time with any of our firefighters across York and North Yorkshire, you will know what amazing role models people are for our communities, for young people in our communities, for all the work that the service does all the time across our communities. And I think that all the stuff that is taking place to encourage people to consider joining the fire and rescue service, either through the whole time route or through the on-call route, all to be encouraged. And certainly when I'm out and about, it is certainly one of the conversations that actually really activates a lot of young people, particularly the young people who are interested in fitness and keeping fit and well, but actually not quite sure where to use their energy. It's just, and I only see brilliant things from the service in that regard. So just to say that was not my view, but it was certainly has been a view that had been shared by other members of the public. So I was just keen to ensure I got clarification on it. Jenny, do you want to come in and then we can move on?
Sorry, just a final one. Look, we are a very open service, and I hope you would agree, Deputy Mayor. What I would say, if people have concerns, then please do contact the service, and I'm more than happy that we engage. We go through a process so we can explain each stage as we already do. But if there are significant points where people feel that they want further information, we're open. We're happy to have those conversations, and we'll always engage with the communities. Thank you.
Thank you. That's brilliant. We can move on to the next slide.
Thank you. Yeah, so building on that picture of recruitment to the organisation and retaining staff, clearly a key pathway for us. So we do consistently receive healthy application numbers. Peaked in January of last year, we reflected the whole-time firefighting campaign, which attracted over 800 applications. In the reporting period, we've also had 78 new starters join the organisation over that last 12 months, and an additional 46 across our joint support services. And all our new entrants are welcomed in the organisation through a structured training course and or our corporate induction day as appropriate. Of the 18 new whole-time firefighters who joined the organisation, this included 7 women. A further 10 on-call employees were appointed in the whole-time roles, so that's on-call staff migrating across and being appointed into whole-time roles in the organisation, and an additional 2 came in via external transfer, and that was in the second half of the last calendar year that occurred. Our annual promotion boards and leadership development programmes continue to support our staff progression, and we also recognise that temporary promotion opportunities help cover short-term gaps but also offer valuable development experience. We've also had processes that have included one for Deputy Chief Officer, me, was the output of that, temporary group manager, station manager, 2 watch manager processes and a crew manager process. Our promotion boards are advertised internally and externally to attract new talent and also to help increase the opportunity for a diversity of candidate applying. And positively to date, over the last 12 months, 18 internal colleagues have secured promotion, and some promotion boards are kind of underway as we are just now. So we'll see that number continue to rise, we hope, because we think it's really important to offer that balance of activity and opportunity for our staff, because we value their role in the organisation. Leaver activity is also relevant, and the highest turnover, as you might expect, occurs in our on-call, and that's reasonable given that this is not their primary employment. Resignation and retirement remain the main reasons for people leaving the organisation, and work is currently ongoing to improve our leaver processes to include enhanced recording of exit interviews, surveys, and stay and say conversations to strengthen the retention insights. So that's the overall picture in terms of recruitment and retention, and I'll pause there in case there's any questions.
Just kind of a question really about just ensuring that we are going out to the widest possible pool of younger people, I guess would be my query in terms of the colleges across the region, mainly because I guess this is an AI-proof area of employment for most people. I know I've seen a fire dog at some presentation somewhere that might be able to do some low-level monitoring, or drones can do some monitoring, but actually, ultimately, firefighting is a physical business that has to be done by human beings, moving stuff around and driving vehicles and all the rest of it. So just really a question really that we are going out to all our colleges to ensure that our young people are considering this as a really important public service job that they should consider in our region. That's probably one for Leanne, really, more than anything.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We do a number of recruitment events in conjunction with police, where we have stands at places, and there's also the cadet scheme as well, which is encouraged via the local stations to reach out to the young people across the county.
Great, thank you. We can move on to the next slide.
Thank you. So just for, again, more on the idea of kind of reporting and transparency in terms of temporary contracts in the organisation, the majority of temporary contracts are for covering periods of long-term absence or modified duties. We also have vacant posts at Scarborough, whilst we are working through the decision process on the future crewing needs for the station. And 28 are whole-time and covering temporarily in another role at the same rank. In other words, their substantive role might be at Malton Station, but they're covering a vacant post at Scarborough would be an example of that. So that gives you a kind of overall picture in terms of temporary contracts. In addition, as I say, 20 on-call firefighters, crew managers and watch managers are in that role of covering support gaps within the whole-time establishment. Temporary motions overall have reduced significantly from 42% to 15% of the whole-time establishment since the reporting period of March 24. So that kind of gives you just a bit of an oversight in terms of temporary contracts. Probably for public context, I think ultimately in an organisation like ours, because of that dynamic nature, there will always be the need and benefit of temporary opportunities, but obviously we try and make sure we don't have too many, because it does bring a certain amount of instability. So just a pause there if there's any questions on temporary contracts.
Only really to understand, if 43 whole-time temporary promotions, that's people on temporary contracts, that feels like quite a lot, but what's the plan to get that down in terms of where it's going from where we are now?
So I'll respond initially, Mayor, and then I'll lean into the team to see if there's any kind of additional take on that one, which I thought Ben might have. So fundamentally, what I would say is that ultimately, quite often that would be a chain of promotions. So therefore, if you have one person promoted higher in the organisation to fill a role, you would then have a number of ones that backfill to it. So that can create a number that are of the same chain. But overall, as I say, the desire is to make sure that we have some temporary opportunities, but that they aren't the actual backbone of the organisation. Ben, do you want to add a wee bit into that?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Just exactly that, Deputy Mayor. So we have two temporary group managers at this point in time. One is doing a project-based role, and one is temporarily supporting a different area of the support service. So for every kind of temporary role we create at that level, obviously backfilling a group manager role creates a station manager to move up. So that domino, if you like, is responsible for 4 temporary promotions. So there are benefits to that as well. It has been down as low as 12. I think reasonably for most fire and rescue service, that's about as low as it tends to go. So we're not too far off where we have been and want to be. Some levels of temporary is beneficial for people, and some of it's just waiting for the next promotion board as well. So we've got an advert out now for watch manager opportunities, and then crew managers will shortly follow. So we're on the ball with promotion boards over the last 2-3 years, sequenced well. A lot of the impact at the minute is where you have temporary roles. The other thing is secondment. So if you second staff out of the organisation to support other organisations, we have 2 or 3 of those. Every role at that level, middle manager creates 3 or 4 temporaries as the domino comes down. So it's about where it wants to be.
Okay. I suppose it was just an assurance question, really, that it's not a situation where actually people are in temporary roles for too long, or that the time lag, if you like, when a post is made permanent whether that actually creates a level of uncertainty for too long, because it's a bit like a house buying chain, isn't it? It also has to be quick at a certain point so that you don't cause too much kind of uncertainty for the long term in the system. Although I completely understand the short-term benefits, particularly for people trying out promotional roles and those kind of things that they might want to then do more permanently in the future. JD?
Deputy Mayor, when we talked around availability earlier, and you know the challenges this brings, ultimately temporary contracts are also intrinsically linked to both sickness and availability, because we'll temporarily promote or we'll use temporary contracts to keep availability running as best it can. But of course, where people then have a long-term sickness and a long-term projection, we'll use a backfill for that on a temporary contract. So they are all linked together. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Sorry, we're overrunning.
No, it's my fault. There's lots to it. So, but it's consistent with that spirit. I'll take the last two slides in quick succession with your permission, Deputy Mayor. So that'll cover off fire standards and Her Majesty's His Majesty's Inspectorate, rather, because they both are broadly around how we are audited and measured by external bodies to ensure we're doing what we should do. So on that kind of approach, the first of these is the Fire Standards Board, and that has been set up to oversee the identification, organisation, development and maintenance of professional standards for the fire and rescue services across England. And there are currently 19 approved standards ranging from Core Code of Ethics, Community Risk Management Planning, Digital and Cyber, and Fire Control, all the way through to safeguarding. And I think probably what's important from what's presented here, the headline statistic from this area of reporting is that we are at 92% in terms of being substantial or reasonable assurance. However, I would assure you we're also continuing to work to provide substantial in all areas, as this is monitored through robust assurance procedures. And I would say, again, it's probably in terms of how you read the data there, although we have some areas showing as minimal assurance, which is the 2% of red that you see there. This isn't reflected in the overall assurance of each standard. It's only we have two standards that are at partial assurance. None of them is at minimal assurance. So I think, that, as I say, I've said assurance a fair amount there. I think that the best read into that is that this is an area where we have for significant and substantial assurance across the bulk of our the areas, and we're continuing to work towards completing that through. And it is an important part of that external validation. And as I said, the second part of that I wanted to speak to is His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Service, or NYFRS in this case here, where we had our most recent judgment in 2025. And is the auditing and monitoring body nationally. It recognised at that point our commitment to improving the services for the communities across York and North Yorkshire, and the 23 to 25 inspection cycle included 5 judgments. They could be, as an outcome, inadequate, requires improvement, adequate, good and outstanding. So the report that was released in June 25 showed clear progress in people areas compared to the one that had previously been done in 21-22. And what that manifested itself there, you can see detailed on the screen, that in the areas of getting the right people with the right skills, we moved from inadequate to good. Managing performance and developing leaders, the movement was from requires improvement to good. Promoting the right values and culture, moved from required improvement to adequate. And ensuring fairness and promoting diversity requires improvement to adequate. And just an acknowledgement to the team that led the work through that kind of period and led the service as well, because very clearly, although again it is a moment in time, it is ultimately reflective of the investment in each of these areas, and we will continue to aspire to improve as we move into the next inspection cycle, because it is ultimately one of the key measures by which the organisation is judged in terms of its performance and its culture and people. So as I say, I'll probably just rattle through those last two to kind of bring things to that close, because I'm conscious of the time we've taken, but I'm happy to take questions on those last two or any of the wider areas covered off.
Thank you. Just really a wider public assurance that this is something that we look at regularly through the Strategic Oversight Board. And of course, we look at HMIC in every meeting. So that's what's coming up shortly in terms of this agenda. And also probably the only other thing I wanted to add was also, as we touched on earlier, that the investment that's gone into the service, one of the reasons that there is that investment through the precept that people are paying on their council taxes in order to get the investment into this support for the staff. because ultimately this is a people business and we need the best possible and best supported staff that we can possibly have in order to keep the public safe. So we do monitor it regularly, and but that has been a very comprehensive review of how people are being supported in the fire and rescue service, and also obviously as always, call to recruitment if anyone who is not currently an on-call firefighter and would like to consider it, that they should seek the information that's available about how they can join the service, because we are always looking. If my drives around the Dales over the Easter break are anything to go by, the signs are always up outside the fire stations for people to join the service. Anything else anyone needs to say on that presentation, or shall we move on? I think it's the spotlight section now, which is my opportunity to ask a question. I just had one question really to ask, probably of the fire chief, around the preparations that the service is making around the increased risk of wildfires. I know that we were on the moors a few weeks ago with DEFRA, and rather concerningly, there was already talk among members of the public who we saw about campfires and barbecues. This was a few weeks ago. We've obviously now had Easter. So just really whether the fire chief or anyone else can add anything in terms of both messages to the public, but also what preparations the service is making before the wildfire season really takes hold, and what the advice to the public is.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor. And I know, we were both quite disappointed, wasn't we, when we saw that people had already begun to have barbecues in those really, really delicate areas up there. We are and always will have a real focus on prevention in this area, and we're really strongly following through with this year. Ultimately, when we responded at the Langdale fire, we responded to what was ultimately a preventable incident. It didn't need to happen, and this is the part of the messaging strategy, and it will continue. There is widespread media coverage, as you've known, and we have asked and engaged with national press in this, asking them to support it. Ultimately, if you're going onto the moors or you're going into open areas where it is vulnerable because of the dry weather and the dry conditions, then be respectful to that and have no naked flames. Don't do any cooking or anything which could then impact on the environment itself, or of course then lead to an incident where we need to respond, as we did last year, unfortunately. Now, what are we doing around prevention messages? So we are targeting, or will be shortly targeting, social media messaging out to key groups to make sure that that message is heard. Deputy Mayor, you and I have had conversations around during Langdale last year. Unfortunately, there was half-price disposable barbecues for sale within communities, and that's something we are actively looking to discourage this year for obvious reasons, but also working with partners. Now, prevention for North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service isn't a single service. It is about collaboration. We're already working with the communities. We're already working with our partner agencies, including Forestry England, Natural England, and as you said, we've had DEFRA and other government departments up just to show them the extent of what happened up there and our call to action collectively in this area. There will be direct messaging to the public. There will be direct signs in key areas, and again, key education wherever possible. We have, and Tom Hurst, who unfortunately can't be here today, his team are undertaking very specific things, and which also includes things like working with the North Yorkshire Moors Railway on prevention, and anybody that we can reach into that we can identify as potentially affected by this, or people that could, unfortunately go and set fires on the moors. We'll do everything we can to engage with those individuals, but also in the Dales. We have National Fire Chiefs Council off-the-shelf campaigns, which we engage with, and they run through a set period each year. We are expanding that this year within the service to make sure that we are, approaching this early, and we'll continue vigorously throughout to make sure we're having those messages. Where we come to comms, now North Yorkshire had one comms officer. Again, from a taxpayer's perspective and investment in the service, we have invested in a second and support and comms officer, so that's significantly assisting us with our campaigns and making sure we can get not only the appropriate message out there, but the wider message as well, and that gives us that extra resilience in those areas. From a perspective of investment, now the communities and yourself and the Mayor have invested in the service. Of course, we've just passed the new financial year. So this now allows us to broaden, as we said we would do in the Community Risk Management Plan, looking at new vehicles and new equipment and training for firefighters. We've already invested in training for more wildfire TACADs, which are tactical advisors that are specifically trained in wildfire firefighting, and they are within our middle managers. Excuse me, my voice is going. And we're looking, as you know, at further vehicles. We're also undertaking a further review of the fire kit investment in crews. We provide specific wildfire kit at local stations, which are predominantly the ones that are responding to there. But a learning that we've taken already from there is, of course, when you have a significant incident like Langdale and you respond with all crews, we want everybody to have the same level of PPE, same level of protection whilst ever they're out there, they're firefighting. We've also, I'll scroll on to this one, we're doing further work with contaminants, because when we talk around staff welfare and how we value our staff, which we do greatly, the fire at Langdale, of course, caused potential exposure to contaminants for our fire crews, as well as communities that were affected by the smoke. So once again, we are a business case actually coming this month on significant investment into contaminants and how we control those contaminants for our crews, which will play out into the long term, again, into the health and well-being of our staff. You and I have engaged with both DEFRA and MHCLG. So government departments engage with us. We've been up onto the moors. They've seen the extent of what the fire was, but also then the understanding of the impact that has had on both local businesses, on the farming community. And we all understand that that is still being felt, which is something that is not in any way, in shape and form lost by the service. Where our key prevention message now is, and one of the new boards that we are setting up, is to bring everybody together. Because the point is that that was a preventable fire last year, and we want to be in that same area this year. We want everybody involved in that prevention message, but again, an education for us from farmers and their land management techniques and what they can also do to proactively manage the land and possibly prevent that fire spread. So this is, as I said, during Langdale, a truly community driven service, and we are out there doing as much as we can, and we'll continue to do so. So both yourself and the communities can take that assurance, Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and that's very helpful. I think most of the public probably wouldn't ever intend to have caused something like this. I think there's a lot of educational challenge sometimes in terms of people's awareness of how something innocent like disposable barbecue, how much damage that can cause, particularly, as you said, in a sensitive environment like the open countryside, of which we have a lot in our patch, and just any open flames at all, whether that's a cigarette or a barbecue or whatever it might be, can have huge implications, as we saw last autumn. Sorry, did you want to come back in?
Sorry, Deputy Mayor. Yes, so my point there was that previous wildfires in other counties have been started deliberately. And this is the point that where we are doing the education, that we will educate everybody and work with everybody to make sure that everybody can enjoy the moors and the dales and other areas. But we also need to recognise sometimes these things are started deliberately. And those services, the police have been involved and they've pursued individuals. We don't want to be there. This is around people enjoying and being welcome in North Yorkshire. We welcome everybody, but ultimately we just need people to be safe and behave safely in respect of both themselves and others. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great. And obviously we'll continue our discussions off outside of this meeting in terms of both the prevention of future wildfires as well as the follow-up and the learning from the incident last year. Okay, fantastic. We can move on to the final inspection report. Sorry, the third-party reports. Are we back with Ben? I think we are.
Yep. So I should be quick on this today. I'm pleased to say I inherited this work in a really good position from Area Manager Henderson and Group Manager Naylor. So I'll just load some slides that I'll quickly run through. I'll trust that's loading okay. So NYFRS, His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, whilst not a regulator, clearly a very influential body on the fire and rescue sector. So when they make recommendations or provide areas for improvement to fire and rescue services, we take it very seriously. So some of their recent work Around 3 years ago, they released a thematic report on the values and culture within fire and rescue services. There were 34 recommendations made to fire and rescue services, and they've all closed. All the work has been completed to meet them within North Yorkshire. Pleased to say our last NYFRS report in 2023 to 2025 had only 7 areas for improvement awarded to North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. They don't provide timescales for completion on there. We're methodically working through those processes, and I'll provide a summary of where we are with those later on in this pack. There was also a standards of behaviour, handling of misconduct in fire and rescue services thematic report, which came out the year before last, which had 15 recommendations. And again, I'll cover that. Pleased to say now 11 have closed, just 4 awaiting closure at the next HMICFRS meeting, hopefully. And recently, HMICFRS did a joint cyber inspection, thematic inspection of fire services and police forces. So North Yorkshire was one of the few who was selected. They came into our buildings a few months ago. There's no confirmed date for that report yet, but I imagine and anticipate there will be some recommendations for all fire and rescue services from there, which we will action accordingly. So the standards of behaviour I mentioned before, there was 15 recommendations the HMICFRS made of the sector towards the end of 2024. So a massive amount of work has been undertaken, really strict governance, well led by Area Manager Henderson and Group Manager Naylor, to get to a point where now 11 have been closed and 4 are at proposed to close status. So without going into the details of all those that are proposed to close, some of them are awaiting rep body consultation, some of them are awaiting an IT solution. A lot of the work has been progressed. There's no great concern about those actions not being completed yet or fully. There's a lot of thorough work that's gone into there. The next HMICFRS meeting is next week, where we'll reevaluate the final 4. Hope to be in a position in the near future where we can report full closure of all the recommendations.
Fantastic.
In terms of the 7 areas for improvement we awarded in our last HMICFRS inspection, again, we're not rushing to resolve them. We want to be really thorough and apply a lot of assurances that we're not meeting the minimum standard. We're really strengthening our position on there. So 2 of those have been proposed to close. We're aiming as an organisation to have those 7 areas concluded by the autumn. We anticipate our next HMICFRS inspection will be early to mid 2027. HMICFRS have started their 4th round of inspections at the back end of last year, and we're now seeing some of the reports come out on other services, but we're quite late on in round 4. So we anticipate it will be early to mid 2027, and all these actions should be resolved by the autumn in ample time to prepare for the next inspection.
It's a roundabout that just keeps on giving, isn't it?
It certainly is. It certainly is. So that's the timeline of our preparation. Some of it may be of limited interest to the public, and that's fine. But as I said, I've inherited this in a really good place. Damien and Mark Naylor as the group manager have done a really good job tracking those actions, putting robust governance in place. So I'm able to report a really positive picture of actions either being closed or on track. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. And like I said earlier, these are also things that we monitor regularly, separately outside of this public forum, in our regular strategic oversight meetings that take place every month. So this is something that takes place regularly outside of this forum. But I don't have any questions on that beyond just understanding what the timeline was. So apologies for overrunning today. We don't have, unless someone tells me anything has changed, I don't think we have any public questions today. I was anticipating potentially questions around Langdale or around road safety, but we've covered both of those issues at least tangentially during the course of the meeting in the spotlight section and also in the performance section, but they are things that we are continuing to monitor. The next meeting for the Fire and Rescue Service will be on the 18th of June, The police online public meeting with the North Yorkshire Police will take place next and is on the 21st of May. All that I need to do, I think now, is just thank everyone, particularly Ben and Gary, for their presentations today. Thank you to Leanne, who I think she's gone, but thank you so much to Leanne for joining the meeting and for her input into the session today, and for everyone else's contributions to the meeting. And we'll see you on the 18th of June for Fire and Rescue Service next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks very much.